Welcome tonight. I hope everybody's had a chance to land. It's so nice to see some repeat members of our audience. And I am very, very pleased to welcome you tonight to the third lecture of the 60th anniversary presidential lecture series on technology and the human future. I'm very happy to welcome undergraduate students and also grad students in our new Masters in Human Rights and Data Science, faculty, staff, alumni, parents, and even some members of the board. Tonight, both the featured speaker and I are both in Paris for the first time since this began, and I believe that a good number of our participants are also in the European region. In a few moments, I'm going to be introducing Professor Georgi Stojanov to you, after which he will take the floor. But you'll remember, those of you who've attended before, that if you have questions while he's speaking, please put them in the chat. And I'll begin with those as he finishes his talk today. And then Jessica Caldy will help me recognize raise hands after that. So at this point in the year, I think most of you know already that this year's presidential lecture series aims to create a platform for an important discussion about the rapidly expanding role of technology in human life, and to consider both the consequences of unregulated technology and also our potential as human beings to marshal technology for good. And this faculty at AUP have been long interested in this set of questions, which I believe is really central to what we do in universities. How do we as scholars, teachers, and students consider the ethical dimensions of what we could arguably call the greatest force currently impacting our lives? Some scholars are fairly pessimistic that the flood of information to which we are currently subjected will gradually and inexorably efface what is known as private life. And our speaker today is going to be addressing that issue. Others believe that we must and can yoke the technological revolution to the protection of human beings and the planet. So what would it look like as well to set in place both ethical controls and good governance to improve our chances of attaining a better human future? So it's a great pleasure tonight to introduce you to the featured speaker, a true global explorer and a full professor in AUP's Department of Computer Science, Mathematics, and Environmental Science. Dr. Stojanov teaches one of our first-year workshops on robotics with a colleague in art history. Students in that seminar arriving on the AUP campus have already built by Christmas time their own robot by the end of the first semester. Dr. Stojanov received his master's and PhD degree in computer science and AI from Saints Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje, Macedonia, after which he created the Cognitive Robotics Group at the Faculty of Electrical Engineering there. He has taught at the University of Trieste in Italy, Les Archives Jean Piaget in Geneva, Université de Versailles Saint-Quentin en Yvelines in Paris, and at the Institute for Nonlinear Science at the University of California, San Diego. All of that, I think, before coming to us. At AUP since 2005, Dr. Stojanov is co-founder of the Institute for Interactivist Studies and a member of the European Network for the Advancement of Artificial Cognitive Systems, Interaction, and Robotics. And that's just to name a few of his many professional engagements. His published work delves into issues of language and translation and analogy and metaphor and logic and perception and attention and pedagogies and learning patterns, computer interfaces, curiosity and intelligent robotic systems, developmental robotics and artificial intelligence, and a whole host of other topics that would mean very little to laymen such as you and I if I were to list them. Luckily, Dr. Stojanov is very good at making complex subjects accessible, and tonight he'll be sketching in a context that we haven't explored yet, notably the idea that the cognitive evolution of human beings is so tied to the development of technology, which has a much longer history than just cell phones and robots, that we could actually speak of the coevolution of human and technological history. As his title suggests, however, the heart of his talk today will be an exploration of what he calls search, connect, obey, the extraordinary power of fairly recent digital monopolies to track our lives, influence our behavior, shape our worldviews, and greatly diminish our agency as individuals. He has promised, however, not to leave us hanging, and we're going to hold you to this, Georgi, as powerless victims of nefarious algorithms, but to suggest in closing ways in which we human beings can take control of this extraordinary force in our lives. So over to you, Georgi, with great pleasure.
So I just believe I am unmuted myself. And
there you are.
The curtain, yeah, hello. So happy to see you all, colleagues, students, friends. And I believe I should share my screen. And thank you, Celeste, first for that nice, flattering and terse presentation, introduction. And thank you for organizing the presidential lecture series this year. The topic is actually always a hot one. Whenever there is a new technology, there is a deluge of literature, talks, and stuff about the influences, yeah, of that technology on humans, human cognition, human behavior, human development, and so on. So let me collapse that. Okay. The title is, I don't know how you understand the title, but my idea was to be scary, that to make you think that although you're writing your personal diary, it's not private, not in a sense that somebody is reading it, but that somebody is writing it, and you're not even the primary author, maybe contributing one. Yeah. So that was the pun with the title. And since this is about the technology and the future, I would like to start with the first, I would say, mistake even, or approach that many researchers in the field make when they try to address this topic of the influence of technology. Usually what happens is they focus on the latest shiny gadget technology and try to extrapolate what will future bring in terms of consequences of that technology on humans, on human development, human behavior, and so on and so on. In our times today, that would be what? Internet, always on, cell phones, AI, big data, robotics, and so on. So everybody discusses about the potential negative, usually, consequences on the humans in general, and especially children, like the always on and online addiction. And there's one researcher who, for example, just an example, who this may be justified, this approach to focus on the latest technology. Yeah, if we have some acute problem, let's say ADHD, or which shows correlation with the time spent on screen, and you can obviously explore that particular correlation, find the causality if there is any, and try to tackle that problem. Or another researcher who faces a problem, a research on addictions, online addiction, especially porn addictions among young males. So apparently that's so prevalent. So he wanted to research this porn addiction. The problem was he couldn't find control group. That is, he could find among college students anybody who has not been addicted or heavily influenced by internet porn. So that he made an analogy. He made an analogy. This researcher with the situation like you have a whole population of males, and everybody is smoker, and you try to establish and everybody has cancer. But since everybody smokes, you cannot have a control group of males who don't smoke. So you can prove definitely that the cigarettes are causing cancer or smoking is causing cancer. So that's his problem at the moment. So in this context, the research which is focused on the latest technology is justified. But in a more general sense, if we want to talk about the future, we have to take technology in its historical context and do not think of technology only about the things that are new for us, for our times, but the things that change human history and change humans, us. So in the talk, change the slide here. Yeah, so I'll give you the first part. I just restated the problem. I'll introduce the technology in a different way in the historical context, starting with the biggest human invention. And I'll claim that actually the coevolution of technology and human cognitive abilities is what happened. That is, our tools are making us as we are producing them. And then I'll continue, and we'll start with human perception. And finally, we'll talk about the current days and the influences and the impacts of the current technology, digital technology, which is qualitatively different from all what we have created in the past, in a sense that this is a proactive technology which is making a dynamical models of ourselves as we are using it, and is capable to influence us in an unanticipated way, in a way that we haven't seen throughout history. So language is by far the greatest human invention. There are many theories how it might have emerged, what would be the evolutionary incentives to invent a language, how it evolved, whether it evolved in several places, or it was only one place and then it spread around. My by far preferred theory is that as humans started with this, and this is again a mystery, how humans started making tools, especially in Stone Age. And they started first using stones as tools, but then saw that some stones are better than others, but those cannot be found in the nature just like that. And they tried to modify, which already is the beginning of making a new tool. So in the very first slide, I had a very popular stone axe from the Paleolithic period, and the sequence of actions that you have to perform on a rough stone has to be quite specific, step by step, and timely, so that you get the finished acts that you do. What does it imply? That implies that you have to have a sustained attention span, or evolved one, to be able first to stay focused on the task at hand, and then remember the steps, what comes after what, so that you're able to produce the final product that you're after. So this, again, we can notice the seriality of the process. So this has to be done in this way and in this way only, otherwise you won't get an axe. And you have to be very specific about every step and every action. Now, it's an interesting question. How would, once, let's say, one person learn how to do this, how would they transmit the knowledge, this know-how, to another person, since there was no language at that time? Well, there are, again, multiple theories. One of the preferred ones, and maybe credible ones, is that we have an innate capability for imitation, which is unique for humans. I mean, to the extent, in terms of degree. So imitation is not trivial. For example, if I ask you, all of you, please do this, you will be probably touching your nose and not mine, because you implicitly say, hey, Georgi is touching his nose, I will probably touch mine. So, and this was actually the innateness of the imitation capabilities were sort of proven by the discovery of so-called mirror neurons. Whereas when you see somebody performing an action like touching their nose, one can measure in your brain slight activity of those muscles, of those regions in your brain, which are in control of those muscles needed or used in that particular movement, which means we can empathize, literally be in each other's shoes, just by looking at somebody. So probably that was the way people learned from each other how to make these tools. But also the claim is that this is what enabled this the emergence of language, which in essence is a sequence of sounds. Because we have one mouth, we cannot say multiple things at the same moment. And then we can produce ordered, meaningful utterances, and that was probably the beginning of language. So the sequential nature of the task imposed this sequential nature of the language, and also with this, as we were creating the language, starting to speak, we could explain more easily to others what we were doing. And we could also talk about other things, and hence maybe create another more complex tool, which would then have an effect on our cognitive abilities. And this coevolution would go on. And essentially, without humanity or without technology, we wouldn't be humans. We would be another species. And actually, my claim is even further, more stronger, that we are different species from the people in the Middle Ages. just because of this cultural evolution, cognitive evolution. As we are making tools, tools are making us smarter or not, at least more complex. And then this continues until today. So I'm trying to skip this. Yeah. Now, the language, what it allows us to do is to perceive the environment, to create the environment, actually, in terms of distinct and recognizable and named entities. And then this should represent the seriality of language as we put this, the words, yeah, in a sequence. So, although we intuitively have this notion that the perception is something like the signals, the sensory, the visual or auditory, whatever, are coming to us, and somehow our brain is transforming this into these discrete symbols and maps everything to language. Actually, it's most likely the other way around. That is, we have the language, and with the language, we impose the structure on the booming and buzzing influx of sensory input. This may be actually the answer to the inability of AI for the moment to get the human level perception abilities, because you would always start from the input and then not use the projection mechanism to impose actually your structure on the environment, which is guided mostly by the language. So the language enabled, or once we had language, so what did the language enable? Yeah, it enabled to communicate with others more efficiently. It enabled this inner monologue that we can talk to ourselves. It enabled this illusion of consciousness. I'll explain myself. Imagine, sorry, it allowed or enabled this imagination and creativity. We can talk about things that we haven't seen, like unicorns. We can create or think of futures that don't exist yet. We can actually think of creating specific futures. The language created this with this inner monologue. It created this headspace. And then you remember the past, you think you are in the present, and you can think of the possible futures and the possibilities. But also the problem is, since we can think about things or invent words that do not exist, we can create problems for ourselves. One of these problems might be consciousness, because everybody is now interested in the science of consciousness, want to explain consciousness, but you cannot, because either they say it's an emergent phenomena, so it's just something more than its parts, or some people go even to quantum levels to try to find something specific in the matter that produces consciousness. But other people, like the philosopher Daniel Dennett, with whom I guess I have the most affinity with, it says that consciousness is an illusion, but not in a sense that it doesn't exist. It's in a sense that with all this sensory experience that we have, our subconscious that is, the thing which is not accessible to our aware and conscious thought, it tries to find the best narrative for what just happened. Yeah? And then that is the narrative we tell ourselves. And that is, for him, it's called the multiple drafts theory of consciousness. And I believe that is the most convincing answer to what is consciousness question. So the perception, again, is important because essentially it creates the world that we are in. The language also allows us to share some common worldview and enable discussion about that world. Now, just to give you, so here, there should be a video that I can show you this blindside phenomena, where people who claim to be blind and they say they don't see anything, they still can see or guess what's in front of them. It sounds, I mean, incomprehensible, but this is a condition. And I'll just show you a short video here.
Now, most people don't get brain damage in such a way as to satisfy the research scientist. Graham, fortunately, has damage largely restricted to the visual cortex and not to the rest of the brain. So that makes it a much more pure case.
Graham's road accident destroyed just a small area at the back of his brain. If losing this area caused him to lose awareness of seeing, could this damaged area be the seat of consciousness?
So,
Weisskranz experimented further. He showed Graham moving lights on his blind side.
Right, unaware. Left,
but
unaware.
prompted to
Right.
Bizarrely, although Graham says he can't see them, he can guess correctly what direction the dots are moving in.
Unaware.
I am completely unaware of an event occurring in my blind field, and yet in terms of which way it's moved, I get it right 90% of the time. Because that's a bit strange, isn't it? And I don't know how I do it.
Right, unaware.
In the environment with obstacles.
Blindside is a condition in which one can respond to visual events without being aware of them.
I believe.
Okay? No, that means that, as you know, with the brain
is convincing that is a narrative that we tell ourselves, and we can be fine without without being conscious. Essentially, that's the blindside phenomenon.
Brain damage. Now, most people don't get brain damage in such a way.
Continue faster here. Now, what happened once we had the simple initial tools that were created in the Stone Age? Once you have some tools, once you have also language that enables you to be more creative, to imagine tools that do not exist, to talk about things that are not here and now at this place. And all of that gives you possibility and enables you to be more creative in a sense of creating more complex tools. And pretty much you get the acceleration of technology growth was exponential. So you can see some of the more remarkable tools that were created, like telescopes, was this telegraph, light bulb, telephone, moon on man technologies. And this is according to the complexity of the technology, yeah, that we created until today. And the trend doesn't seem to be stopping. You can also observe this with the increase of number of words in languages. Well, just look at the Oxford Dictionary of English. And that sort of mirrors this. Now, it's not only words that we are inventing. We are repurposing other words. We're creating also new notions via analogies and metaphors. And that's one way to communicate something to somebody that has no clue what are you talking about. Let's say you've invented internet, and you want to explain that to somebody who has no clue what the internet is. So you have to use analogy and you have to use metaphors. So that's probably the only way that you can do that without explicitly showing that. And even if you're showing them, maybe they won't understand the concept. So we are influenced by language, and we are susceptible by what things are we saying. And we are being empowered every time a new tool or new technology emerges or it's being created. Obviously, every technology has, it's a double-edged sword. So it can be used as intended, but also it can be used in and that pretty much happens all the time, where technology, specific technology is used for it's used for nefarious causes. Now, for example, we can talk about how Stone Age tools changed humans. We can think about all these critical things, but probably one of the most consequential invention was the Gutenberg press, where it was easy to make, with the moving print technology, copies of texts. Primarily that was the Bible in the beginning, but then it was all sorts of written text. Now, that was, of course, I skipped the invention of written language first. And then once you have the written language, you can jot something and take notes. Again, write fiction at some point, invent things, draw non-existent things, and so on. So these are the possibilities that are open. But already in ancient Greece, Socrates was sort of warning us about the problems with this technology, that the youth will now sort of decrease their ability to memorize things, because they will just write everything down and they will just take a look at what they've written when they need it. And that view is still maintained by other philosophers. Back to the printing press, that allowed that allowed the democratization to begin with of the reading skills, because in the Middle Ages, mostly the literate caste or class were the monks, and most writings were about religion, and the common people, it would be rare that somebody would be literate. The written language now, imagine again, enabled us to take and have a diary, to write down what happened that day, and then never in the history of the human kind that was possible that you would be able to to sort of remind yourself what happened a year ago. And then for those of you who at some point of your life maybe have diaries, you know the feeling when you're reading something like 2 years ago that you've written, and you can tell that that's not the same person. So you're changing yourself through your being, actually, that you're evolving or cognitively developing, and your personality essentially changes in that way. Of course, we have the Industrial Revolution, and there are many writings, especially in the States, with the railways, with the factory lines, about how would that imply on the human behavior, on the society as a whole, in the human future. Okay. I would like first to say something about the how suggestive how susceptible we are to suggestions, but I think there won't be time. If there is time at the end, I'll show that video. And now I would just like to jump into the topic of that latest paper I've published, the Search, Connect, Obey, which is quite pessimistic in terms of what's going on in the latest internet connected technologies. So I include here Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, but my example will be with Google and a bit from Facebook, because I mean, again, there is no time and pretty much the pattern is the same. So Google started in '97 as a search website, simple online search website, no login required, anonymity by definition. And because of their superior product, the algorithm, which is still proprietary, they are now handling 91%, about 91% of all worldwide online search. So they saw that possibility, and their business model was placing relevant ads. Now, how would they do that? How would they know that they're relevant for you? Well, to be able to access your, let's say, browsing history, they've created their own browser from browser. Yeah, so that make their ads relevant according to your history of browsing. Okay? When the mobiles arrived, cell phones arrived, well, they didn't want to miss that whole market, and they created the Android operating system so that they can track what you're doing online on your cell phone. And they create their own phone, actually. Pixel, I believe is the name. And suddenly you have to have just one account, Google account, and to have access, free access to all these goodies and free services from Google Docs to Google Translate to free space on Google Disk and so on. Yeah. And on the other hand, Google had access to whatever you were producing or whatever you were doing online or on your phone, for example. So, although initial business model was producing relevant ads, they sort of found a way to benefit from your personal data and from what's called the digital exhaust, like the cookies, or again, the information about the places you've been, online and offline with geolocation when you're with your cell phone. Your text messages, your emails, and surfing habits, and many other habits, photos taken, accelerometers, metadata about the calls made and received, and so on. There are thousands of data points per person. So this is what they did with this data. It turned in what's now called the dynamic psychopredictive models, which means I have a black box that, given your history, what I have about you in terms of data, I can pretty much predict what are you about to do, not only online, but also offline. So not only I can predict, but I can nudge, I can influence you towards something I want you to do. So to begin with, after, let's say, how is that done, that influence of Google on you? After you insert your query in, let's say, the search, the proprietary algorithm is now, your new perceptual system online. It's like seeing the online reality through Google. It filters links that will be shown to the user. If you're logged in with your Google account, you won't have the same hits as I would have, because those are filtered and ordered according to my psychopredictive model or profile. Then the ranking algorithm will order the links partially based on overall link utility, which will be the same for everybody, like how many people clicked on that link, number of other websites linking, and so on. That's the organic growth of independent of you. But the ranking could also be based on your model, as well as some hidden Google's agenda. We don't know. The links at the top would be perceived by you, the user, as more important, because there is the up is good, down is bad, or up is better. Moreover, some negative links, let's say about products, political candidates, may be completely omitted. So this is lying by omission from your search results, depending on how Google wants to influence you. So this practice would protect the products or candidates from our negative biases. So if Google discovered from my psychopredictive model that I have negative bias towards some candidate, and that candidate bought not ads, but the privilege not for this negative hits or negative pages for that candidate not to be shown to me, they can pay just like as they are paid for ads, and I won't see that. Or be discouraged to choose to click on that negative link. Also, the query, if you have that feature, autocomplete may turn you into specific phrasing, resulting in a biased result list. Just one more thing, it's the shadow ban. That's a practice where Google completely exclude or put way down like a 500 place from the list of results for both of you and the website owner, and you're not aware about that. So this is important here because, I mean, nobody knows that this is happening. But Google, on their own, they have just publicly admitted they fiddle with the algorithm on a daily basis. This is a quote. The company rolls out 1,500 to 1,600 changes to the search algorithm each year. So effectively, what happens is that you're now perceiving this online reality through the extra perceptual Google, goggles, not Googles, yeah? And with its completely distorted, but in a controlled way, especially designed for you individually. So this is a recent example of a manual control. There was some, I don't know which podcast, where there was a discussion about mass formation psychosis. Somebody was connecting, I believe, if I understood well the article, that to COVID psychosis. And then Google, they simply, because they saw many people were searching for this was like a week ago, mass formation psychosis, they simply cut the results for everybody. And although there were 10 million results of that, because obviously that's not from today, this is something that's current in psychology. And it just put the message, it looks like these results are changing quickly. If this topic is new, it can sometimes take time for results to be added by reliable sources. Now, imagine there are 10 million results and they say, if this topic is new, I mean, it's a contradiction, yeah? So now you will see all sorts of results for this mass formation psychosis and properly filtered. Now I have another example for from Facebook, but I think I will skip that, and we can. I'll just go to the last slide. Well, the problem here is that all this power to control so many individuals is concentrated in half a dozen companies who are governed by individuals who are not elected, let's say, but can influence the, let's say, elections. They can influence the behavior of the whole population. They're more powerful than governments. The governments are trying. GDRP, we have that in Europe, to put legislation, but for the time being, everybody among these 4 or 5 companies are just dealing with this by paying the fines as a business expenses, because there is nothing else they can do. In the States as well, the government, it's either weaker and will just obey to this CEOs who own the companies, or join them, and together they will just issue legislation which would be useful for both of them. That is, the people in the government and the people in the companies, but definitely not for you. So I want to actually get towards the end with some like a positive note, if I can, by saying that by being aware of all of this, you will not escape that, but at least being aware that, hey, maybe that is not your decision. Think about it. Or try to Google, or not Google, try to use alternative search engines. Try to, again, being mindful of what is being presented and why is that being presented to you at that point. Like, use your critical thinking about the results of this routine search process, yeah? Because for the time being, we saw in the past 10, even 20 years that legislation doesn't work for the moment. Okay. And my belief is that being aware of the possibilities of private searching, private surfing, using VPNs, virtual private networks, using different browsers like Chrome, like Brave, like Tor, like the other, who are not trying to follow you. They're masking your IP address so that you appear as a different person every time. So a reliable psycho-predictive model cannot be built about you. So that will be my message to you. Yes, the technology is definitely changing us. It's changing our habits. We can see the effects already with, I could give as examples, the disappearance of the public sphere discourse. We cannot see anymore a prolonged discussion on a specific topic. Just look at Twitter when some hot topic du jour is being discussed. That's not discussion. That's just like thousands of micro silos are just screaming short slogans instead of a discussion. Huh? So short attention span, inability to sustain a longer discussion, and completely fractured worldview, if any, actually. Okay, I said I was going to finish on a positive note, but that I'm going dark places again. So that would be all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Georgi. And I can see that the questions have already begun to come through. It looks like the first two questions are on the part of your talk. So let me just capture this first one.
Just is sharing here somehow.
Yeah, maybe let's stop sharing. That will help.
Jessica, I was not able the other.
There.
Oh, excellent.
Jessica, maybe you want to spotlight Georgi, and I'll just I'll read questions. So Cliff Mahler put up the first question to you, Georgi. Are you asserting that these human evolutionary cognitive changes are a result of technologies and are thus environmentally based, like software, versus DNA naturalistically based, like hardware? Can you see the question on your chat?
Let me open the chat. Yeah. So the way I understood it is it actually, is this genetic modification, or is it software, or what you said? Or, well, let me just see. Human evolutionary conditions are technologies and software. Yeah, I wouldn't say, because the time scale is not the natural DNA evolution as we would understand the hardware, if you wish. It's definitely like for example, the human species, like the Homo sapiens, is what, about 90,000, 100 years about the appearance of Homo sapiens. That's not enough time by a long shot for anything to change in the DNA. So that had to be something else. Just look how different we are, the societies, from the year 1000. So that's not the DNA change. That's change, as somebody said, in the software, yeah? In our vision of the world, in what we create as tools and how tools affect us. Yep.
Great. And then this is a question that kind of follows machines. And this is from Jackson Van. Thank you. Machines and technology have offloaded mostly physical labor for most of our past, although some mental labor in the form of the written word. Now that we have made machines that can, in a sense, think, how do you think this will affect human evolution in the sense that we can now offload both mental and physical labor to technology?
Well, thank you for that question. Actually, that's a very good question, and it shows a view of the mind, the classical view, so-called, of the mind, where the mind is in the brain. So there is a thing called the extended mind theory. It's maybe among the proponents of this theory, Andy Clark, Maturana Varela, Hutchins. Whereas throughout the Homo sapiens, not evolution, but let's say cognitive evolution, with the cognitive revolution started 90,000 years ago, our brains, it's not true that we are only offloading the physical. Actually, we're offloading a lot of mental work. Again, think of writing. We are not trying to remember many things, we just write them down. We also are able to tell the time, not because we can keep track of it in our minds, but because we can have a wristwatch or we can look it up on the phone. So like when somebody asks you, have you got the time, please? You don't say, let me check or something. You just simply intuitively answer the question as if you knew what was the time. As if you incorporated in your mind the watch, so that you say, for whatever it's immediately accessible to me, I can treat that as if that thing were in my mind. So I can tell you the time. But if I ask you, for maybe some of you wouldn't, that's the example from Andy Clark, what is clepsydra? Maybe you don't know, maybe you know. If you don't know, you go and search and you find out what is that. But imagine if you could make that process much faster, to the point that this would be searched immediately and you would have instant access to that. I don't know whether the brains would simply, or the minds, offload that as well. So you can say immediately, yes, of course, I can tell you what is clepsydra. So we are using everything which is around us to offload many cognitive tasks, because language and serial thought is expensive. That's why the cortex is sort of it takes a huge chunk of the brain and energy in the brain. So yeah.
Thank you. So now I think, since I don't see any questions in the chat, I'd like to open the floor to anybody who would like to ask a question directly, and perhaps even to address the issues that Georgi raised at the end of his lecture, which is, what are we going to do about this incursion into our private lives? Oh, here's a question from Claudia. Hi, Georgi, could you please say a few words on how exactly we have changed as a consequence of technology interaction? Perhaps my question is, have we really changed? Isn't it instead that we operate in a different environment that we have created? Claudia, put your face on so we can see you, so you can engage in the discussion here.
I'm reading the question indeed in the chat as well. how exactly we have changed as a consequence of technology interaction? Perhaps my question is, have we really changed? Just instead, isn't instead that we operate in a different environment that we have created? Well, I think, and Claudia, that thanks for the question. That the last part actually it's a bit confusing because you say we changed because we've created something, and that's my claim. Well, maybe you say, well, environment is not quite a tool. Yes, no, maybe, but the claim stays. I believe that we have changed. I don't think, and try to imagine the inner mental world of a person who has lived, let's say, between 500 and 1,000 of our era, of the common era. What were they thinking about? What was their inner mental life? Well, probably something about the religion, something about the usual, the repetitive work they had to do, agriculture work and so on and so on, domestic work, maybe. Like 90% or maybe more were not able to read, yeah? Again, I wonder whether we could call these people conscious in the same sense that we're using now. Even the word consciousness is only from the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. There are languages without the word for consciousness. So my claim is even stronger. We're a different species from these people who live thousands of years earlier. So
maybe I can clarify a little bit.
Sorry?
Maybe I can clarify a little bit. So I'm trying to understand how you think this change, which you say it's even a different species, is any different from the change that would happen to any of us by interacting, for example, with other people or interacting with anything which is new in the environment. So if this interaction, this change that you're talking about is the same as I can experience when I interact, for example, going to the beach for the first time or over and over, and it's a different experience, or if I meet a new person or I talk to a person. So can we claim that that is a change in our species, or if not, how is this difference?
Okay, so technology or anything which is produced by us, it's qualitatively different from anything like the beach that you will find in the nature. Yeah, so that won't change you in a way that the tool that was human created will change you. Or I mean, at least it won't change your cognitive qualities in the same way that the tool or using the tool will change you. So by creating a tool, technological tool, you're also opening possibilities for other people to create other tools using the tool that you've created, which explains this exponential growth of different tools, of technology in general, and of language. I mean, that again, the word now, we have about 1 million words in English. So that's far different. Like, we can think of now things, again, that were made possible because we just created technology, and we can make an analogy with that. For example, a daughter of a friend of mine said, "Oh, I just had a dream, and I sort of fell into a beach or something, and then I thought, hey, how stupid that, I'll just go to the previous level, like as if that was a game. So it does change us in a cognitive way. It does change our language. It expands our language. Expanding the language means that you can express different new ideas, which will give you ideas for yet more newer tools. So that's what I'm saying, that is qualitatively different from that when you compare that to things that you find in nature and you interact with. Just to give you another example from science. So science advances and it's based on previous whatever theories, instruments, whatever it was created. So let's say the telescope was created, invented, and then you could see more, you could give more plausible theories how to explain the movement of celestial bodies, and then somebody else can use that to, again, advance a new theory, maybe more reliable theory, and so on. So I find that significant in the change, be it in science or in the cognitive abilities. I don't know. I don't see how are we the same, like from people in the Middle Ages.
So I'm going to go to Eula now, who's had her hand up for a while. Eula Wildberger, would you like to ask?
Eula.
Hi, Georgi. Listened to your talk with great interest. I listened to your talk with great interest. Can you hear me? Is it okay?
Yeah. Now it's okay.
Okay. Let me just quickly lower my hand, so otherwise I forget. So first thing is, I think all that Dennett and all that stuff needs to be redone because it's missing one particular important element, the emotions, the affective side of the human being. I mean, you're talking about pattern recognition, pattern imposing, and so on. Also, when you talk about consciousness, we have a mammalian brain with some basic affects in there, and
yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it's just kind of a rich world that isn't really taken account of in Dennett's work.
Okay, how about the I understand this as a comment because I don't think it will change much here in the basic. Can you try to explain to me how?
So the fundamental difference is what we're talking about right now too is that, and maybe that is connected to Celeste's question, was talking about the technology and what it can do. But I mean, what we want to do, what it means to us comes through emotions. And when people talk about technological progress, at a time, for example, where we have kind of our whole world falling to pieces in so many ways through our idiocy, and people having no better idea than considering a war in the middle of Europe and stuff like that. I'm kind of saying, where is the progress here, right? And and all this. So what I mean is we seem to be the same idiots as ever, and so what you would need to have is emotional progress or understanding us not just as so to say tool finders and fact finders and so problem solvers, but also people who evolve in different ways. So I don't see the big difference there from and I would say that the thinking in this respect, if you read someone like the medieval philosopher Thomas Aquinas or or Abelard is so original, so nuanced. I mean, that's far beyond what most people nowadays can think. Yeah. And if you look at and just to connect this I think that in many ways our technology is not making us more complex, it's making us more stupid. Think of the practice of gaming.
Oh, absolutely.
Where you are given all these stereotypes and you don't interact with a real person that doesn't fit your stereotype. They all have the same kinds of garments. There's nothing that really comes in your way. It's this obstacle smoothness that is absolutely stultifying. You don't have a reality check anymore. So I think that's various ways in which kind of our lives become simpler until at some point we crash because we have to go out of our bubble.
I'm with you. But I was a bit confused when you said affective side and this, but then Thomas Aquinas, of course.
Yeah, it's two different points. It's two different points.
Yeah, a different point, meaning the cognitive, let's say, evolution, if you wish, and capacities. But again, we're talking about religion, although Thomas Aquinas is a bit different. And even at that point, we can talk about Brentano, we can talk about what is this? The French guy, L'évêque de Meaux. So we have, of course, throughout the history, we have these people who were the 1%, if you wish, who could read, who could write, and so on, who they had access to the modern technology, unlike the 90% of the rest of the people who didn't. And I don't think they were, they had the same abilities.
Yeah, but I mean, ordinary people see pictures, play a game. I mean, they don't develop this technology. They use it in very simple and primitive ways. For me, it's kind of the internet. When you said the internet, for example, in the old times, they wouldn't know that. I mean, for me, it's just I switch on my machine and then there comes your image. I mean, that's really quite primitive.
I mean, of course, we had
from building the internet.
Yeah, okay. So let's try to converge those two.
Eula is doing a great job of doing the Socratic gadfly here. This is exactly what we need her to do.
Yeah. Just this last thing, I with you about the what we're witnessing now. With the latest technology, which are trying to mimic you, influence you without your first consent and second, even knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that's, as you say, that's not empowerment. That's absolutely, as you can see, what's happening online, as you said, there is no reasonable discourse or anything. There is screaming in thousands of silos, and that's it. So that is because we do not share anymore a similar worldview upon which we can build. And maybe, even if we do not agree on many things, at least agree to disagree and not just agree. So I'm with you, Eula, on that. That's not this. That's I was trying to find something positive to end on. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending tonight. Georgi, thank you so much for sharing this talk with us. And I'd like to ask all of you to stay tuned for the next lecture in the series, which will be delivered by Gabriela Ramos, who's the Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences at UNESCO. And she will be analyzing some of the negative impacts of big tech on diversity and inclusion and share with us some projects that actually lean upon technology to broaden our sense of the human. Thank you, Georgi. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and see you next time.